Good evening, I'm Alex Truth.
And I'm Maya Clarity. Welcome to Truth Report, where we dig beneath the headlines to expose what power doesn't want you to see.
Tonight, we're covering surveillance, the architecture of control that's being built around every citizen, often without their knowledge and increasingly without their consent. We have 4 stories that connect in ways that should alarm anyone who values privacy and democratic accountability.
We're going to show you how the FBI can force your own body to unlock your phone. How a controversial NSA spying law is about to expire while the administration stays suspiciously silent. How a British Prime Minister is navigating surveillance state China. And how Hong Kong is tightening control over what children learn.
These aren't separate stories. They're chapters in the same book, a book about how governments and institutions are perfecting the tools of observation and control. So let's get into it.
Our first story comes from the Intercept, and it's a wake-up call for every person who uses biometric security on their phone. On January 30th, reporter Sam Biddle revealed disturbing details from the FBI's raid on Washington Post journalist Hannah Natansen's home.
For those who missed it, Nat Ansen was raided as part of the DOJ's aggressive pursuit of government leakers. But buried in the search warrant was something that should send chills down the spine of every American: explicit authorization for agents to use Natansen's own biometric features, her face, her fingerprint, to unlock her personal devices without her consent.
Let's be absolutely clear about what this means. The Fifth Amendment protects you from being compelled to testify against yourself. Courts have consistently held that you cannot be forced to give up a password because that's testimonial. It requires you to reveal the contents of your mind.
But biometrics? Your face. Your fingerprint. Courts have increasingly ruled these aren't protected the same way. The legal reasoning is that your physical characteristics aren't testimonial, they just exist. It's the same logic that allows police to take your DNA or your photograph.
The Intercept's reporting highlights how this creates a devastating loophole. Law enforcement can simply hold your phone up to your face while you're restrained or sleeping, or press your finger to the sensor. No warrant for the contents of your mind required, just a warrant for access to your physical features.
And here's what makes this even more concerning. The convenience we've been sold for years: just look at your phone and it unlocks. That convenience was always a trap. We traded constitutional protection for convenience, and now we're seeing the consequences.
The Intercept's Sam Biddle explicitly recommends that everyone, especially journalists, activists, and anyone who might be targeted by law enforcement, should immediately disable biometric authentication on their devices. Switch to a strong alphanumeric password. It's less convenient, but it's constitutionally protected.
Think about the chilling effect here, Maya. We're talking about a Washington Post reporter, someone at one of the most prominent news organizations in the world, having her home raided by federal agents who were authorized to use her own body against her to access her communications with sources.
Sources who trusted her. Sources who may have been exposing government wrongdoing. Sources who now have to wonder whether any journalist can protect them when the FBI can literally unlock that journalist's phone with her face.
The attorney-client privilege, doctor-patient confidentiality, journalist source protection, these pillars of civil society depend on secure communications. And what the Intercept is showing us is that the government has found a way around those protections by exploiting the very technology we use every day.
Now, some viewers might say, I have nothing to hide. Why should I care? Alex, break down why that argument is dangerously naive.
The nothing to hide argument assumes you can trust every government, every administration, every law enforcement officer, forever. It assumes the definition of criminal or suspicious will never expand to include things you consider perfectly normal. It assumes power will never be abused.
History shows us exactly the opposite. The surveillance tools built for terrorists get used on journalists. The databases created for criminals get used on protesters. The powers granted for emergencies become permanent. This is the pattern, documented over and over.
And let's talk about who loses here. It's not the powerful. Politicians, executives, the wealthy, they have lawyers, they have resources, they have ways to protect themselves. The people who lose are the whistleblowers, the sources, the ordinary citizens who might one day need to report wrongdoing.
The Intercept piece is essential reading for anyone who uses a smartphone. The message is simple but urgent. Your biometrics are a liability, not a security feature, if you have any reason to be concerned about government access to your device.
Which brings us to our second story, and it connects directly to what we just discussed. Also from the Intercept, reporting from January 29 reveals that Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, one of the most controversial warrantless spying authorities ever granted to the NSA, is set to expire soon, and the Trump administration is staying completely silent about its position.
Let's give our viewers some background. Section 702 was created as part of the FISA Amendments Act of 2008. It allows the NSA to collect communications of foreign targets located outside the United States without individual warrants. In theory, it's supposed to be about foreign intelligence.
In practice, it has become one of the largest sources of warrantless access to American communications ever created. Here's how it works. when the NSA collects communications of foreign targets, they inevitably sweep up enormous amounts of American data too, Americans communicating with foreign contacts, Americans whose emails pass through foreign servers, Americans caught up in the digital dragnet.
And here's the critical part: once that American data is collected, the FBI can search through it using American names, email addresses, and phone numbers, all without a warrant. They call these backdoor searches, and civil liberties groups have been fighting against them for years.
The Intercept's reporting shows that the Trump administration, despite its past rhetoric about deep state surveillance and FISA abuse, is refusing to say what it thinks should happen with Section 702. The law requires periodic reauthorization by Congress, and that deadline is approaching.
This silence is deafening, Alex. Remember, Donald Trump himself was reportedly the subject of FISA surveillance during the 2016 campaign. He called it a witch hunt. He railed against the intelligence community. His supporters were outraged about surveillance abuse.
And now that he's back in power, silence. Because here's the uncomfortable truth: every administration, regardless of party, has embraced these surveillance powers once they control them. The powers that seem like abuse when used against you become essential tools when you're the one wielding them.
The Intercept's reporting underscores a bipartisan failure here. Democrats expanded these programs under Obama. Republicans maintained them under Trump's first term and renewed them again. Civil liberties get sacrificed at the altar of national security rhetoric, and the surveillance state grows regardless of which party is in power.
Who benefits from this silence? The intelligence community. The FBI. The NSA. The agencies that have grown dependent on warrantless access to American communications. They don't want a debate. They don't want reform. They want quiet reauthorization.
And who loses? Every American whose privacy is violated by these backdoor searches. Every person whose communications are swept up without individualized suspicion. Every citizen who believes the Fourth Amendment should mean something.
There have been reform proposals. The bipartisan push to require warrants for searches of American data has had support from both progressive Democrats and libertarian-leaning Republicans. But those efforts keep getting blocked by the intelligence establishment and the lawmakers who serve as their champions.
What's particularly galling is the lack of transparency. We still don't know the true scale of how many Americans have had their communications searched under Section 702. The government has resisted disclosing these numbers, claiming it would be too burdensome to count.
Too burdensome to count how many times they violated Americans' privacy. Let that sink in. The surveillance is so vast, so automated, so normalized that they claim they can't even tell us how many people it affects.
The Intercept is doing crucial work keeping this issue in public view. Because the pattern is clear, these authorities get renewed in the dark, without the public debate they deserve, and the surveillance state expands another inch.
Our third story takes us overseas, but make no mistake, it's deeply connected to everything we've discussed. The Guardian reports that British Prime Minister Keir Starmer is embarking on a diplomatic visit to China, the first by a British PM since Theresa May in 2018.
And The Guardian includes a remarkable detail that reveals just how normalized surveillance has become among world powers. Before her visit, Theresa May and her team were advised to get dressed under the covers because of the risk of hidden cameras in their hotel rooms. Let me repeat that: the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom was told to change clothes under her blankets because China might be watching.
This isn't paranoia. This is the realistic assessment of British intelligence services about what happens when you visit an authoritarian surveillance state. Every device compromised, every room bugged, every communication monitored. This is the endpoint of unchecked surveillance power.
And yet, here's Starmer walking into that environment anyway, because economic interests override privacy concerns. The Guardian reports he's trying to thaw relations with the world's second-largest economy, balancing the risks against the potential rewards.
Let's talk about what China has built, because it's the most comprehensive surveillance state in human history. Facial recognition cameras on every corner. Social credit systems that track citizen behavior. Mandatory apps that monitor communications. Complete integration of corporate and state surveillance.
The technology China has pioneered doesn't stay in China. It gets exported to authoritarian regimes around the world. And elements of it get adopted, in softer forms, with better PR, by Western democracies too. The architecture of control is going global.
What The Guardian's reporting shows us is the uncomfortable dance democratic leaders do with surveillance states. They publicly express concerns about human rights. They privately get dressed under the covers to avoid hidden cameras. And they still make the trip because the economic relationship is too important.
The UK's relationship with China has been icy since 2018, partly due to concerns about Huawei technology in British infrastructure, partly due to Beijing's crackdown in Hong Kong, partly due to espionage allegations. Starmer is trying to navigate a reset.
But here's the question The Guardian raises implicitly: can you have a normal diplomatic relationship with a country whose surveillance capabilities are so advanced that your own intelligence services tell you to get dressed under the covers? What kind of partnership is that?
And this brings us directly to our fourth story, which shows surveillance as a tool not just for watching, but for controlling information. The South China Morning Post reports that Hong Kong is stepping up scrutiny of private schools, with new powers to revoke registration if management is deemed unsatisfactory.
The stated rationale is reasonable sounding. Some schools have allegedly offered unauthorized courses and collected fees without approval. That's the surface justification. But look at the context and the implications become much darker.
Hong Kong's education system has been systematically brought under Beijing's control since the 2020 national security law. Curriculum changes, loyalty requirements for teachers, restrictions on what can be taught about history and politics. The academic freedom that once made Hong Kong a regional education hub is being dismantled.
The South China Morning Post reports that under these new guidelines, the Education Bureau can issue advisories, warnings, or outright revoke school registration if management doesn't meet their standards. But who defines those standards? What counts as unsatisfactory management?
When the definition of acceptable education is controlled by an authoritarian system, scrutiny of schools becomes a tool for ensuring ideological conformity. Private schools were one of the last spaces in Hong Kong where alternative perspectives might be taught, where children might learn things Beijing doesn't approve of.
And let's connect this to surveillance. How do authorities know what's being taught in classrooms? How do they identify unauthorized courses? Through monitoring, through informants, through the surveillance infrastructure that now permeates Hong Kong's society.
The South China Morning Post, to its credit, continues to report on these developments even as press freedom in Hong Kong erodes. They note that the new code of practice follows reports of specific management problems. But the pattern is clear: every new power granted, every new oversight mechanism, becomes a tool for control.
The children in Hong Kong schools are learning a lesson that isn't in any curriculum, that they are watched, that deviation is punished, that the walls have ears. This is surveillance as education, teaching the next generation that freedom has limits defined by the state.
And this connects directly to what we've been discussing all night. From the FBI using your face to unlock your phone, to the NSA searching your communications without a warrant, to Chinese cameras in hotel rooms, to Hong Kong classrooms under scrutiny, it's all part of the same phenomenon.
Let's synthesize everything we've covered tonight, because these 4 stories aren't random. They're connected by deep structural forces that are reshaping the relationship between individuals and power.
First, the technology. Biometrics. Mass data collection. Facial recognition. These tools exist now, they're deployed at scale, and they're getting more sophisticated every year. The question isn't whether surveillance is technically possible, it's who controls it and what limits exist.
Second, the legal frameworks. In the United States, constitutional protections are being circumvented through clever legal arguments. Your face isn't testimony. Foreign intelligence collection that sweeps up American data doesn't count as domestic surveillance. The law is being bent to accommodate surveillance, not to limit it.
Third, the institutional incentives. Every intelligence agency wants more data. Every law enforcement body wants more access. No bureaucracy voluntarily surrenders power. The surveillance state grows because the forces pushing for expansion are organized and permanent, while resistance is sporadic and under-resourced.
Fourth, the economic pressures. Even democratic leaders who understand surveillance risks still visit authoritarian surveillance states because money talks. Tech companies that could build privacy-protecting tools instead build surveillance-enabling products because that's where the profits are.
And fifth, the normalization. Getting dressed under the covers to avoid cameras. Assuming your phone can be unlocked with your face against your will. Accepting that your communications might be searched without a warrant. This is becoming the background condition of modern life.
What we're witnessing is the construction of a global surveillance infrastructure that transcends any single country or government. The technology is shared, the techniques are adopted across borders, the data flows internationally. This isn't just about the NSA or China's cameras, it's about a new normal for human existence.
The people building this infrastructure will tell you it's for security, for safety, for catching bad guys. And sometimes it is. But the capability, once built, doesn't limit itself to legitimate uses. It expands. It's abused. It's turned against the very people it was supposed to protect.
Tonight's stories show us different points on the same spectrum. Hannah Nat Anson, a journalist doing her job, having her home raided and her body used against her. Americans having their communications searched through a legal backdoor. A prime minister changing clothes under blankets. Children in schools being monitored for ideological deviation.
The question for our viewers is, where does this end? If we accept each incremental expansion of surveillance power, if we trade privacy for convenience and security for freedom piece by piece, what kind of society are we building?
The Intercept's reporting on biometrics has a concrete recommendation: disable facial recognition and fingerprint unlock on your phone. Use a strong password. That's something every viewer can do tonight.
But individual action isn't enough. Section 702 requires congressional action. The surveillance architecture requires political will to dismantle. The export of surveillance technology requires international coordination to limit. These are collective problems that need collective solutions.
What we can do as journalists is keep exposing this. Keep connecting the dots. Keep showing how stories that seem unrelated are actually parts of the same larger pattern. The Guardian, The Intercept, even the South China Morning Post under pressure, journalists worldwide are doing this work.
And we need the public to pay attention. To read beyond the headlines. To understand that the convenience of biometric unlock and the theoretical threat of terrorism and the economic benefits of trade with China all come with costs measured in privacy, in freedom, in the ability to dissent without being watched.
Tonight we've shown you how your face can be used against you. How your communications can be searched without a warrant. How surveillance capabilities shape diplomatic relationships. How educational freedom is restricted through monitoring and control.
These are the realities of 2026. The surveillance architecture isn't coming, it's here. The question is whether we accept it as inevitable or fight for something different.
For Truth Report, I'm Alex Truth.
And I'm Maya Clarity. We'll keep digging, keep exposing, and keep telling you what power doesn't want you to know.
Disable your biometrics tonight. Call your representatives about Section 702. Pay attention to what's happening in Hong Kong. And remember, the greatest power of surveillance isn't what it catches, it's what it prevents. When people know they're watched, they censor themselves. They conform. They stop questioning.
Don't stop questioning. Don't stop demanding accountability. Don't let the architecture of control become so normal that you can't imagine anything else.
Thanks for watching Truth Report.
Good night, and stay vigilant.